continue the discussion of privacy by looking a little bit more deeply into cryptography, and in particular, public key cryptography and how it's important for all kinds of digital commerce and exchange of messages in a very secure way. Some additional terminology that we need to cover is a definition of keys and different kinds of keys. So in an algorithm for cryptography, a key is what's used to convert a plain text document into a ciphertext or a secret document. And there's two basic kinds of keys, a symmetric key and an asymmetric key. A symmetric key is kind of like our common key that we use to open doors. So the same key will both lock and open a door. So that's the idea of a symmetric key. So if I have a symmetric key in cryptography, I have a single key that can be used to both encrypt and decrypt the message. Compare that to an asymmetric key where there are two separate keys. One key will lock the door, another key will unlock the door. Now that's kind of a hassle in terms of everyday life. We don't want to have two keys for everything, but it's fairly useful in terms of securing documents, as we'll see. So going back to the history of ciphers, the Caesar cipher is a type of substitution cipher where we just align a set of letters and place them over top of another. So for example, on this slide, the letter A maps to D, the letter B to E, and C to F. And this is again the kind of ciphers we would see as puzzles in a newspaper or a magazine, where I have a plain text and then I map underneath it the actual cipher key. And then I take my plain text and everywhere I see, for example, the letter A, I replace it with a D and so on. And then eventually I'll be able to encrypt the message, and then I can follow a similar path going the other way to decrypt it. One form of a substitution cipher is called ROT13, and I can use the same approach to both encrypt and decrypt a message. So for example, letters A through N are mapped through letters M to Z. For example, A maps to M and N to Z. And then if I wanted to reverse that, I just move over 13 places again. So if you look at the letters of the alphabet, ROT13 will say shift over 13 places to get the ciphertext, and then shift over another 13 places to get the original plain text back. So for example, the phrase hello world would encrypt to this unpronounceable thing that you see here on your slide, URYYB space JBEYQ. And then if I want to decrypt it, I just shift the letters back another 13 characters so that then comes back as the decrypted hello world again. So this is useful for like if you were trying to hide your screen, someone would be walking by and you press a button and it would convert sensitive information on your computer screen to ROT13 so that someone couldn't read it. It's not really secure in terms of long term. If someone could access that, they could easily decipher it, but they couldn't read it in a short amount of time. So one thing you might want to think about is asking your class to implement ROT13. So ask the user to, in Snap, to enter a string of characters and then convert those characters into their encrypted form, and then have another way that I can decrypt them back to the original message. So this is just a series of if statements comparing different values of letters and just transforming them into another letter, whether it's being decrypted or encrypted. So the problem with symmetric keys is that the single key is used to both decrypt and encrypt. So how do we get that single key to two different parties if they're geographically not located together? So imagine a war in, hundreds of years ago, and we wanted to encrypt a message from a leader to those on the front line. We would often have to have a shared symmetric key already distributed. So that could be intercepted if there's some kind of unsecure way of getting that to them. So the whole key distribution problem, it becomes an issue when we use the same key for both encryption and decryption. With a public key, that's not the case. So with a public key, I can broadcast, or an asymmetric key approach, I can broadcast a public key and let the entire world know what my public key is, but yet I then keep another key private. So the key distribution problem is solved here. The trick is, how would I associate the private key and the public key in some way so that I can publicly broadcast one key and keep the other one private. And there was a big breakthrough, an approach by Diffie-Hellman and later realized by the RSA algorithm, that I can use prime numbers as this connection between the public and private keys. So the inability to factor large prime numbers actually is a mathematical principle on which a lot of our digital commerce is based. So when we encrypt information going from your credit card, or if you're accessing your bank over the internet and you see the HTTPS on top of your web browser, then the security that's happening is often some form of this type of cryptography. And the way that I transmit information over an insecure channel using public key cryptography goes a little bit like the following slides. So we always use, for some reason, the characters Alice and Bob whenever we're discussing these kinds of examples. So the idea is Alice wants to send Bob a private message. So how will she do that? So there's really 4 keys involved. There's Alice's public key and her private key, and then there's Bob's public key and his private key. So A public, A private, and B public and B private. So each person has a public key that they let the whole world know, and they also have a private key that they keep secret to themselves. So imagine that Alice wants to send a message to Bob about getting together for a meeting. So Alice can take Bob's public key and use an encryption approach that the public key mixed with her message is encrypted using some algorithm, and then that ciphertext is then sent over some insecure transmission medium, and then Bob receives that message and he takes Alice's message and he decrypts it using his private key. So if there's a relationship between Bob's public and Bob's private, then an algorithm can be developed where Alice takes the public key to encrypt the message, and then Bob uses his private key to decrypt it. So then imagine that Bob wants to write back to Alice and suggest, yes, let's go ahead and meet somewhere. So Bob then does the reverse. He takes Alice's public key and encrypts the message, sends it over insecure lines to Alice, and she then uses her private key to decrypt it. So the same process in reverse. So here's a dilemma though for Bob. So the only person that can read the message from Alice is Bob, but anyone can produce it. So how does Bob know that Alice's message to meet actually came from Alice and not someone else? I mean, what if there's a disgruntled ex-girlfriend named Susie who wanted to try to get Bob to go somewhere where Alice wasn't, and just to inconvenience him, and she could send a message also to Bob and claim to be Alice. So the interesting thing though is Bob's reply back to Alice can only be read by Alice because Bob used Alice's public key. So as Bob replies back even to a bogus message to Alice, Susie can't read that. Alice may wonder why this message is coming to her because she didn't originate it, but at least Susie could not read what Bob's reply would be. So another way that Alice could ensure that she was the originator of the message is that she can sign her message. So she can take the original message that she has and she can attach to it a digital signature. So the digital signature is unique to Alice, and she can use her key to produce it with her private key. And so the signature is just a message that is encrypted with Alice's private. So she can take the original message that she wants to send, attach to it this private signature that's been encrypted, and combine the two, and then use Bob's public key to encrypt that and send it to Bob. So if there's ever a question about whether Alice originated or not, Alice could come back and use her public key to decrypt it, as well as Bob. So these kinds of digital messaging or digital signatures can be very useful for helping to prevent imposters from attacking and misrepresenting someone, tampering with any content, and anything that could thwart someone who's trying to misrepresent another individual. So digital certificates are actually maintained by trusted third parties known as certificate authorities. VeriSign is an example. And these are used to help authenticate and validate the identity of certain people or organizations. And there's a time limit often on the certificates. And at high security levels, the frequency in which these certificates are validated refers to the high level of security depending on the specific need of that organization or person. As mentioned earlier, there's a relationship between the public and the private key that helps to enable this type of cryptographic system to work. In this course, we won't go into the details of that. As mentioned earlier also, one example could be utilizing the fact that large prime numbers are hard to factor is a possible way to do that, and in fact is heart of some of these algorithms, such as the RSA algorithm. So instead of getting into the mathematics of that, there's a video that's mentioned here on this slide that you might want to show your class. It uses the idea of mixing colors to reveal a new color that two people can agree upon based upon the two colors that are mixed. So this is an exploration that first touches upon the idea of using colors and then gets into the mathematics of this. So rather than duplicating that, this is an excellent video that goes into all of these details, and I just encourage you to look at this and share this with your students. So in the next set of lessons, we're going to talk more about the internet apart from privacy issues or encryption, and discuss the fundamentals of how the internet works in terms of packets, protocols, and all the different kinds of technologies that are involved in making the internet work to send information that we use every day.